G'day guys, Justin Pickett back with another video today. I just wanted to show you something pretty interesting about HECS. Obviously we're coming to the end of financial year, indexation comes in on June the 1st, so that's giving us just a little bit of time before your HECS is going to be increasing, which could be bugger all for some and it could be really, really expensive for others with that inflation at around that 7% mark. So expect your HECS to be increasing by about 7%, which is pretty rough, but I suppose it's got to be in line with CPI and inflation. So what we're trying to do here is have a look at the impacts on what this has on your borrowing capacity. Up to you whether you want to pay it off or not, but having a look at some of the pros and cons on should I look at paying my HECS off or should I not worry about it and it's not really going to affect me too much and maybe I can keep looking at my investing journey at the moment. So just going to give you through an example here just with some of the numbers on my computer. So I'm just going to have a look at an example of someone who's got some HECS and I suppose the difference of how much it's going to make to their borrowing capacity when they're starting out, and then also a scenario of someone who's got multiple properties and how that HECS impact does change down the piece. It's all very common that people we deal with do have a HECS debt, when they're starting off and they're investing, and something that we do see regularly is, come in full-time salary. I'm just going to use the example here of 95,000, and we can see our borrowing capacities here on the right as of today's date. Now, if I do put a HECS balance in through here, you can see it's knocking that around between 60 to maybe 100,000 with some of our lenders, as we can see. And regardless if the balance is 50 bucks or 50 grand, the assessment essentially stays the same. So on that side of things, the amount of your HECS really doesn't make too much of a difference. It really comes down to if there's a balance there or not. So HECS on, HECS off. We can see that it's giving about that kind of 60 to somewhat $100,000 difference there, which is quite a lot. So that's an example of someone there that as they're getting started, it might not make a massive difference, to their initial maybe first one or two properties, if that HECS balance does linger around. So you might be able to look at getting away with your first couple without having too much of a bearing. Now, what we will have a look at here is the example of if we were to look at someone who has a larger number of investment properties and how that impacts them. So we're going to have a look now at an example of investor. They've got 7 properties in their portfolio in this example, and what we're looking to do here is seeing, they don't have any HECS at the moment, so we've got a bit of lending capacity. But if we put that HECS on just for one of the applicants, knocks around by about $300,000 to $400,000. So even if that balance is 50 bucks, even if it's 100,000, even if it's like 10,000 as an example, that balance doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that there's a HECS parameter that we need to take into account. So with a larger portfolio, you really start to see that HECS becomes a bit of a plague. And the reason that is because they calculate all of your rental incomes essentially and stack them up. So if you had an income of say $100,000 per year, then obviously once we whack out your rental income of 7 properties, maybe that's another 150,000. They're assessing the HECS at say 250,000, and that range is obviously quite high. So HECS on, HECS off. So you can see there it's a massive difference on that side of things. So HECS, if you had a balance of 10,000, maybe you get rid of it and look how much it's going to free up for you. If you have a balance of $100,000, that's where we've got to ask ourselves a question. Do we really want to pay off $100,000 that's a somewhat dead money, or do you think we can keep that going in your portfolio? So for most people I'm dealing with at the moment, if it's a smaller balance, maybe less than 10K, and we can get away with doing that, it's not going to make too much to the budget, okay, awesome. But if it's something like $100,000, that's a pretty sizable amount of HECS. It's something we just got to weigh up that scenario. That could be, a deposit on 1 to 2 properties, and I suppose over time that may allow you to get going forward. What you might find though is that with a balance of say 100,000 on HECS, if we're going to have indexation of about 6 to 7%, by the time you make those contributions, it's getting whacked back on again with CPI. So it's a bit of an interesting one. It's always going to come back down to your individual scenario. I think student loans are starting to become a bit more of a bad debt now rather than being a good debt as what they once were. Obviously with what's happening online, the amount of courses and things you can do on the internet without having a degree, and also the landscape of work as well. So yeah, up to you obviously with your HECS, but here's a bit of a guide on how much that makes a bit of a difference to your servicing and lending capacities. If you need to have a look at this scenario, we want to run through it together, feel free to reach out to us and happy to run these numbers and see where it sits, and look forward to working with you soon. Cheers.